Spoilers for Red Sonja, the Ballad of the Red Goddess. The more we have, the more death will take from us. This is a quote said by the adversary from the Red Sonja short story, The Ballad of the Red Goddess, written by Roy Thomas, but more importantly, illustrated in a collaboration by Esteban Morato and Santi Casillas. I say more importantly because I want to take a departure from what I usually talk about, which is typically the writing in comic books. I don't always give enough time to the art in my favorite stories, sometimes only stopping to say it's absolutely gorgeous. This is because while art can make or break a comic, it's far less subjective than writing, at least to me. It's pretty easy to look at an artist's work, especially in comic books, and decide whether you like it or not. If you like an artist's style once, you'll likely like it again, and again, and again. With a writer, you can easily like one story of theirs and hate another. If this happens with an artist, it's usually considered a clear sign of failing physical ability, which is more objective than subjective in nature. This often, if not always, leads to the backlash to any comic book story being pointed at the writer, rarely the artist. Outside of a controversy involving the wrong racial coloring, secret offensive symbols, or the over-sexualization of a character, artists don't see the same backlash that writers do. And again, the backlash artists faces is far more objective. We can objectively measure that Storm's skin isn't as dark as a Kenyan native's should be. We can objectively point out an offensive symbol hidden in the background of an X-Men Gold panel. We can objectively see when an artist has put a female character in an unrealistic sexual position or costume, like anytime Clayman draws Catwoman. But that doesn't suddenly change whether an artist is good or bad, only if they made a mistake or are of poor character. To better understand the dichotomy between the treatment of writers versus artists, think back to the recent controversy with Tom King's run on Batman. Many people hate it because of how it ended and how it didn't properly capitalize on the marriage of promise between Batman and Catwoman. Tom King's name went from being one of the most beloved names in comic books, from his esteemed work on The Vision and Mr. Miracle, to being trashed in most corners of the internet. But the artists for those issues, Michael Janin, Clayman, Tony S. Daniel, and more, are never brought up. Ever. While I don't think they should receive backlash, far from it, I don't even think Tom King deserves anywhere near the backlash that he gets. I do think this is the product of art and comic books being unappreciated. This all leads back to my main point that art can truly drive a story. Something I've noticed in the reading I've been doing is that even when a comic book story is poor, quality comic art can carry it through. Art can drive a story, and it was Red Sonja, the Ballad of the Red Goddess, that helped me realize that. From the first page, I knew the Ballad of the Red Goddess was something special. The first page was something ripped right out of Castlevania, from the way this ancient and elven castle sits before a red moon, in a world colored in only black, white, and red. I thought this would only be the first page, but to my delight, it turns out that Esteban Morato and Santi Casillas made the inspired decision to make the entire book black and white, with particular use of red. The art truly drove this story and made its story beats work, because without this inspired style, this book, in all honesty, isn't all that special. I love Red Sonja. Originally introduced to us in 1973, she's had a rocky history, especially when it comes to her origin. She originates from a time when warrior women characters couldn't get away from being motivated by revenge and sexual assault. Writers like Gail Simone have reinvented her to avoid this, but sadly, time and time again, Red Sonja is dragged back to this outdated origin. This kind of story isn't terrible on principle. The story is that it's been so poorly played out across so many mediums and across so many Red Sonja stories that it's grown grotesque with how she can't evolve without it. Red Sonja is more than a victim, and Roy Thomas's plot barely illustrates that in this short 3-chapter story. A villain is introduced in the first chapter to be cruel and nihilistic, and in the second chapter we learn Red Sonja's tragic and horrific origin all over again. But in the third act, we do see her slaughter the villain and his cabal. And that's it. The plot should sound pretty mundane and repetitive, but the tale is beautiful, haunting, and shows a side to Red Sonja that's deeper than trauma, and it's all because of the art. In the first chapter, only 3 things of color pass the opening shot of the red moon and Red Sonja approaching it. The first is the red sash strung across the chest of a villain known only as the Adversary. The second are his own red pupils inside the white of his eyes, and the eyes of his beheaded victim. The third are the red lips of the bard who tells Red Sonja's story, old and new. Not even the innocent princess that gets beheaded gets to be colored red. Through Morato's and Casillas' art, we know what's important and what is powerful in this world. We know the position the Adversary holds as he wears the red sash, and what he fails to see happening around him through his eyes. Both of them contrast to the genderless bard's red lips. From them, the adversary is warned of his impending doom by the hands of Red Sonja. But being that it's a warning he cannot see, it is a warning he ignores. This chapter is good. While the art is amazing, I'm sure anyone can read it and think that it doesn't prove anything other than that the book is pretty. But how it leads into the next chapter is what sets it apart. In the next chapter, from the bard's red lips, we see Sonja's tragic origin. We see how she became the best sword fighter her master had ever trained. Her skills weren't given to her, she worked for them, at least before her master is killed and she is sexually assaulted by the Reavers who killed him. These first few pages are colorless, and unlike Oming's original Red Sonja run, the scenes aren't tasteless enough to force graphic imagery of this horrible act on the reader. For a few pages, the book seems like a slog, forcing us to repeat Red Sonja's dreaded assault in the same way we're forced to rewatch Batman's parents be murdered over and over again. But then the Red Goddess appears, known as the Morrigan. The color red first enters the chapter with her arrival. Through the horrifying image of the Morrigan's form, Morato and Casillas already do so much to right the wrong that was doing this horrific origin for Red Sonja. Instead of creating a loving and comforting goddess, they create the mirror to match Sonja's pain and rage. They craft this monstrous and unforgiving face, with horns fit for a goddess of vengeance. While the Morrigan's words are not empty, it is how her red form bleeds into the surroundings and even the panel edges that allow for a well-understood anger to take over the book, and Sonja therefore. This art carries the themes of revenge forward. This art drags out the emotion of anger from us as it does Sonja, not the writing which can border on fetishizing Sonja's assault. And when Red Sonja is bathed in the blood of her sacrifice to the Morrigan, she becomes the Red Sonja the bards sing terrifying songs about. It is as the blood washes over her head that we can understand the necessity of this story. This is when the pain, rage, and suffering has justified its existence. In this moment, we understand why the she-devil with the sword must exist, to murder any and all who harm and scar innocent women as Sonja was. It's this scene, this full-page panel that evokes emotion and reaction, not what Red Sonja says or what the Morrigan says to her. It is the art that shows Sonja's state of mind and being that tells us all we need to know about the depth behind her motivation to kill who she kills. One panel, even if it were wordless, can tell us why we should root for and sympathize for Red Sonja more than anything Roy Thomas could have put to word. That rage only continues through that chapter, showcased in a 2-page wide spread of Red Sonja butchering her assailants, with the Morrigan overlooking her. It tells us how unimportant these men are to the world, how meaningless and corrupt their lives are by basking in Red Sonja, in the red of her hair, and the red powers of the goddess, without giving these men any hint of color. This is the power of a truly great comic book art, to create emotion and meaning past and beyond whatever the words may say. And the book never stops doing this. Not even the beginning of the third and final chapter lessens its dependence on the art, when Red Sonja has finally reached the adversary's castle. Morato and Casillas create this haunting shot where Red Sonja is an all-black figure save for her red eyes. She's a demon come to reap the souls of vile men, and we know the world should be terrified because of this. From here on out, Morato and Casillas only continue to do what they've been doing, which is to use their art to amplify Red Sonja and de-emphasize the adversary and his cohorts, who don't even get the smallest hint of red, even as they're slain. Only Red Sonja, the adversary's paling sash, and lips of the bard who tell her tale get to be red. A sash that crumples to a color far less than vibrant upon the adversary's death. Art drove this book through all 3 of its chapters. The color red denoted where you should pay attention and what your attention can ignore, likely even should. Art controlled what mattered in this Ballad of Red Sonja, what you should have felt and who truly mattered. The scorned victim who arose to slay her victimizers, the innocent princess full of tears before being unjustly murdered, the adversary who could not foresee his own wrongdoing, and the bard who would see the tale foretold for generations to come. These are the things we must pay attention to and learn from. These are the people that mattered. Art drove everything home, not writing and not the language. This book could have been without any words, and while it might have been a bit difficult to follow, the main points would have remained. The emotions would have remained. and the lesson to be good, to keep red vengeance from coming down upon you, would remain. Art can drive a story, and maybe artists are due a bit more credit than they get from me and you. Artists have given us much to lose when death comes to collect. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and comment about any recommendations about comic books you want me to read or make an essay video on. And if you like stories by up-and-coming creators, I do have my own books on Amazon that I have published, and I'm currently writing more, and you can find the link to them in the description below. Please check it out. I would appreciate it, and I hope you would enjoy it. Thank you.